Are you looking at investing in property overseas, perhaps a golden visa program? Many people are looking in European countries like Portugal, like Greece, like Spain when the program was open. Whilst a number of these European programs have either closed their doors for applications, have increased the requirements for people eligible, or generally have very strict criteria, there are a number of other golden visa and residency through investment in property programs with lower requirements and what many would consider to be good value for money properties in the Gulf region. So in this video, I'm going to look through the GCC countries at what is on offer, and I will rank them in terms of what I believe to be the most accessible and best value for money. Let's get right into it. If you're new here, my name is Jonny. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living and working in Madrid for the past 5 years. On this channel, I talk a lot about personal finance, investing, living and working and traveling abroad. And so whilst I live in Spain and a lot of the content on the channel as a result is Spain oriented, the Gulf region has come up multiple times across the channel, the United Arab Emirates being a popular country that often comes up in videos, and with guests on the Multinational Money podcast as well. There are several who either live in the UAE or have interests in the UAE. And the Gulf and what this video looks at will not just be the United Arab Emirates, but all of the countries across the GCC. So in addition to the UAE, we'll be covering countries such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman. And so from my own evaluation and from speaking to others as well who are based in GCC countries, there are a number of reasons why people are drawn to these countries. Many foreigners and expats from the West who move over to the Gulf move over for professional reasons, and many of them are able to secure a good income and a good standard of living in the GCC countries as well, with a lot of them being able to pay little to no income tax depending on where they're living and what kind of income they're earning in those countries. Because there are multiple countries in the Gulf that don't have personal income tax, and many of them have low corporate tax rates as well, in addition to no tax on the likes of capital gains and dividends. So particularly for the likes of business people, entrepreneurs, people who are looking to grow, build wealth and create economic stability, or as well maybe live quite a high standard of living for the money they're making, then they can be drawn to one of a number of countries in the Gulf. Obviously summers in the region can be very intense, very hot, with many people staying inside, not really going out at all because it's just so hot. Other people as well even, leave the region during those 6 months and maybe travel or go to Europe or North America even to spend the summer there, to spend a milder summer, returning, for the European and North American winters, for example. Anyways, as I say in this video, it's going to be more focused on acquiring residency through the real estate options in the GCC countries, but I will touch on with each country, some of the other benefits and possible other residency routes that are available as well. So I'm going to cover these countries in ascending order of accessibility. That's to say that the first countries I talk about are not going to be so accessible, if at all, for foreigners and expats looking to move to the region, with the last ones being the most accessible. That is again from a residency buyer property investment option. And so we'll start with probably the strictest country, not only in terms of immigration, but in terms of property ownership in the Gulf as well, and that's Kuwait. And so when it comes to property ownership for foreigners in Kuwait, it's very strict how it's managed, and it's only really GCC nationals that can freely purchase property in Kuwait. But non-GCC citizens, to be able to buy a property, there are a number of criteria that you have to fulfill. One being that you've lived in Kuwait for at least 10 years, then you get government approval for the purchase, that you are only allowed to hold one property with a maximum of 1,000 square foot in terms of its size. And so as a result, you can pretty much cross Kuwait off the list when it comes to looking at Gulf countries to invest in property with, unless of course you're a GCC national and that's something that you're potentially interested in and see as an advantage. And in addition, it's worth noting that owning property in Kuwait does not grant you residency. The next country is also one that you can pretty much cross off the list as well. It maybe slightly edges Kuwait because it's a little bit more relaxed, and that's Oman. So Oman, like Kuwait, does not have a residency buyer investment in property program. However, Oman does allow foreigners to own property in the country in ITCs, known as integrated tourism complexes, essentially designated property. So it is possible to own property, but it does have to be in a very specific area. Like in Kuwait, owning a property doesn't grant you residency in Oman, and laws and regulation are constantly evolving as well. And so with Oman and Kuwait crossed off the list, that essentially leaves 4 countries in the GCC where it is possible to invest in property and get residency. And so the next country on the list does have a program, but it has a minimum investment higher than the other 3 remaining countries. It also only has one type of residency via investment available, and there's criteria that any property has to meet for someone to be eligible for that. And so with that said, let's talk about the next country, which is Saudi Arabia. It's great to think that if I were doing this video maybe 5-10 years ago, Saudi Arabia would probably be in the same bucket as Oman and Kuwait. But of course, under new leadership, the country has making significant steps in trying to open up as part of the Saudi 2030 vision. And so opening up a route to residency via investment is one of the ways in which they've done that. And so to acquire residency through investment in a property in Saudi Arabia, the minimum investment required is 4 million Saudi riyals, which is about 1 to 1.1 million USD, 1 million euros, or 800,000 pounds when converted. It's not possible to buy a property with a mortgage if you're going down the Saudi route. There can't also be any outstanding charges against the building, and it has to be a residential property as well. Commercial properties would not qualify. And whilst buying a property in Saudi does grant you residence, the duration of your residence essentially depends on how long you enjoy use of that property essentially, or how long you're owning it and living in it. So you could be in Saudi, I guess from anything from 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years and more, as it's all tied to the ownership of the property. And so what can you get for the quite high requirement of 4 million Saudi riyal? Well, because it's so high, you are looking at pretty upscale and luxury properties as a result. I did a bit of research into what 4 million Saudi riyal could get you in Riyadh and Jeddah. You'll see from the screenshots here, we're looking at villas with multiple bed and bathrooms, in very nice complexes, probably swimming pools. You got a maid room in the property as well. So you are looking at some pretty high-end property. And therefore, it's probably not something that like the average person looking for a property may be willing to purchase. It's probably more for higher net worth individuals, this program. And so this is kind of why I've given it this ranking and sitting here in kind of the order. That said though, as I mentioned, because Saudi is opening up a lot, there are a number of other visas available, like entrepreneurship visas, investor in business visas, you got like talent visas for sports stars, education, all that kind of thing as well. All right, now let's move on to the next country, which also only has one option in its residency through property program. However, the minimum investment required is much lower than Saudi and also has a minimum residency period that comes associated with that investment, and this country is Bahrain. Bahrain is definitely the smallest of the Gulf states, and whilst it doesn't necessarily draw the same level of attention as some of the other Gulf states, and maybe doesn't have as many residency routes available as some of the others, the real estate option is somewhat accessible and certainly much more accessible than the program in Saudi Arabia. And so the minimum investment requirement for Bahrain's program is 200,000 Bahraini dinars, which is about 530,000 USD, 500,000 euros, or 400,000 British pounds. Whilst I haven't found anything that explicitly prohibits buying it with a mortgage, it does say that you need the property deed. So with that, I would interpret that the program in Bahrain is more likely, again, like Saudi, a program where you can't purchase a property with a mortgage. You would have to buy it outright, is my interpretation. Nevertheless, the benefits that come with that are that you will get a 5-year residency through that golden visa, and you'd be able to sponsor family members to come and live with you in Bahrain on that visa as well. And so what can 200,000 Bahraini dinars get you in terms of property? Well, because of the size of Bahrain, there's not that many properties available. Nevertheless, the property prices aren't as high in the likes of Saudi. And again, I'll put some on the screen for you, but you'll see the prices here. They're comparable properties to what you could find in Riyadh and Jeddah. Perhaps slightly smaller in terms of the number of rooms, but the price point is just below what you're looking at in Saudi. So some people would argue that this is better value for money in terms of a property investment. An interesting observation I made is that there wasn't really any properties kind of around the minimum value. Everything was kind of a little bit above. Again, it might be the fact that Bahrain is quite small, and as a result there is kind of a floor, if you like, in terms of property prices. So that could explain that. Worth noting as well that on top of being able to reside in the country, this would kind of get rid of the need for you to find a sponsor if you're looking for employment in Bahrain. And you could also own other business as a result of that as well, and other property as well. So that leaves us with 2 countries now, and both countries left have quite competitive golden visa programs. The country that is in first edges it ever so slightly just because it has a few more options, I would say. as well as longer residency durations and just more general availability of property as well. And so before we get to the country which I've placed in first position in terms of accessibility through these residency by investment programs, let's look at the one that ranks second, which is Qatar. Many of you that watch the channel may know that I spent a couple of days in Qatar last year, and I made a video about the Qatar Airways stopover program as well, which was really good. And it gave me a chance to explore the two main cities of Qatar, Doha and Lusail. And it really opened my eyes to the way that Qatar is also on this path to opening up and developing. And from what I saw, I definitely consider it to have a lot of potential. And so with that, Qatar does have a residency via investment program. They've split it into two tiers. So the tier 1 program is for a temporary residency permit, which would require a minimum investment of 728,000 Qatari riyals, about 200,000 USD. That temporary residency permit is granted for 1 year initially, but is renewable throughout the years. There's then the tier 2 option, which is the permanent residency program. And so this option requires a much greater investment of about 3.7 million Qatari riyals, which is about 1 million USD, in exchange for a 5-year permanent residency card to stay in Qatar. So an interesting program in the sense that it offers the foot in the door through the tier 1 program, and for people who are willing to invest more, there's obviously the tier 2 option as well. What is worth noting as well, which is another reason why I ranked Qatar slightly below the country that's in number 1, which I'm sure you've all worked out by now, is that whilst foreigners can own property, it is somewhat restricted, and it is only in eligible areas that foreigners can hold property. And so eligible areas, there are 9 of them when it comes to freehold properties, and these include the likes of the Pearl, the Lusail City and West Bay Lagoon. And there's also 99 leasehold areas across Qatar as well that are eligible for foreigners to hold property. What is interesting with Qatar's program as well, unlike in Bahrain and in Saudi, is that you can purchase these properties with a mortgage. There are in fact banks in Qatar that advertise mortgages specifically with the goal of helping customers get that temporary or permanent residency through property investment. So looking again at what these prices can get you, when it comes to the temporary residency permit, if you're staying around that $200,000 mark, it's not going to get you much, in all honesty. You can look on the screen and you can see for around that price point, you can expect to find like a studio apartment or at best a 1-bedroom apartment in the areas that I've mentioned. However, when you increase that up to the 3.7 million real mark or 1 million USD, then of course, you know, again, villas, luxury apartments start to pop up in the search results. So for some people that might kind of make it a bit of an all or nothing situation, in the sense that the middle ground isn't really beneficial in any sense, because it's like overpaying for a temporary residency program. And as a result, if you have the capital, you might think, well, why don't I just pay, I don't know, like $300,000-$400,000 more and get a permanent residency program, but at the same time, you know, you may not need a villa or a luxury apartment. So that is something to think about when it comes to Qatar's program. Nevertheless, I do think it is quite an interesting program, especially with the fact that it can be done through a mortgage. That program, like in Bahrain as well, will give you the right to work in Qatar without the need for a sponsor. As looking at the other residency options in Qatar, there are a couple, but kind of like Bahrain as well, there's not that many, or the ones that are available, the requirements are quite high. And so onto the country now, which I believe has the most accessible programs when it comes to residency by investment. And I'm sure you've all probably worked out by now that I ranked the UAE as that country. And so the UAE has 2 essentially golden visa programs when it comes to getting residency through property investment. There's also a third program, which is part of a retirement visa, which also has property investment as an eligible option to get that retirement visa. So first of all, you got like a 2-year investor visa, which with a minimum investment of 750,000 UAE dirham, or about 204,000 USD invested in residential property. That'll give you a 2-year residency permit in the UAE. You've then got a 10-year program, which with a minimum of 2 million AED investment, or about 545,000 USD. That'll get you a 10-year residency permit. And then the retirement visa is somewhat in the middle of that. So you can get a 5-year retirement visa with one of the eligible options being owning a 1 million AED property, about $272,000. The other option, for those of you that are interested, is to have about the same amount of money in savings and about $49,000, $50,000 in annual income. And so you can see that a range of different options at different price points in the UAE for someone to get residency via investment. With the 10-year visa option as well, it is possible to have a mortgage on that property as well, but the minimum threshold is very strict, and that is what has to be paid to be eligible. And so whilst there are all these programs in the UAE at different price points, the thing with the UAE, especially Dubai, is that property prices have just been skyrocketing over past years, and they've increased almost exponentially in terms of price. So, the properties that you maybe could have got a few years ago will now be essentially pushed further up that investment requirements, if you know what I mean. Across the different Emirates as well, those investments can get you massively different things as well. Looking at the lowest minimum requirement investment visa, that 2-year option, that in Dubai will probably get you like a studio apartment, maybe a 1-bedroom apartment at best. But if you're looking in other Emirates like Abu Dhabi or Sharjah, it might get you a 1 to 2-bedroom apartment, so something a bit bigger. Whilst I was in Dubai last year, we did stay in an apartment that kind of meets this description. So let me show you actually what we stayed in. And so you can see the kind of apartments that we're talking about, primarily in the UAE, but these same style of apartments do exist in the other Gulf countries. So take a look at this. Okay, so currently in our Airbnb that we're staying in here in Dubai, very much resembles, the typical modern, like luxury style apartment that, your average person relocating to Dubai or perhaps looking to invest in property in Dubai might be looking for. This is a smaller apartment, so 1 bedroom, we have the living space, 1 bathroom, and then a kitchen area over in the corner. I'll show you a little bit of it as well. We're in a very high rise building on one of the higher up floors, so we have a nice view out over the bay. Actually on the other side of the building, some of the other apartments, they'll have a very nice view over the Burj Khalifa, kind of that area. So very, very nice apartment. So yeah, where we're staying, I would say resembles probably the kind of apartment that someone might be looking for when moving to Dubai or looking to invest in property in Dubai. And despite these skyrocketing prices, honestly, demand for property, especially in Dubai, is incredibly high. Just take a look at this clip from last year when we stayed in Business Bay and you'll see all the construction going on.
So we're in Business Bay now, which is a very popular business district of Dubai right next to DIFC. And just looking around, you can see there's cranes everywhere. Obviously the large buildings around me, behind me, on the other side of the camera as well. And it's clear that Dubai is still building, there's still property coming up here. So clearly there's a lot of demand for property at the moment, just from what I see being here on the ground.
It's also so popular that walking through the malls in the UAE as well, especially the likes of Dubai Mall, Mall of the Emirates, there are property development companies there advertising their different developments, such as Sobha Realty, Nakhil, Damak, Ema. Got here a couple of brochures that I ended up taking away from some of the projects that are going on. Ended up coming away with quite a few brochures because I was interested to see, what kind of developments are going on. And the ones that I'm showing you from the brochures here, when I inquired about price points, they're around about, probably the $400,000-$500,000 mark. So these are the kind of properties that would potentially qualify someone for 10-year investor visa in the UAE. So that's essentially what $500,000-$600,000 will get you, like maybe a really nice development in a new area away from the center, or it might get you again like a small apartment, like a 1 to 2 bedroom, but in a very high demand area of Dubai, like maybe on the Palm, in the Marina, maybe in downtown area essentially. And again, at the same time, like in Abu Dhabi, that'll get you like much bigger properties. You're looking at maybe 3 to 4 bedroom apartments or houses even. And in Sharjah, like can get you a villa essentially, like that $500,000-$600,000 mark. And so with all of that, that's why I put the UAE as number one, because in spite of increasing property prices, there are a number of options available there, and people who have the budget can probably get something that works for them that could get them a residency permit in the UAE. In addition to the golden visa and retirement visa that have been mentioned as well, I think the UAE also tops the list in terms of the number of available visas that are out there for people looking to move there, because in addition to these two, you've also got an investor visa that you can set up as an entrepreneur. And it does seem relatively straightforward to set up a UAE company and therefore qualify yourself for a visa down that route, as well as different work visa options as well that are out there. So there you have it, guys, an overview of all of the different programs when it comes to residency via property investment that exist in the Gulf region. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. Leave a comment and let me know if you're interested in any of these programs, or if any of them seem particularly appealing to you in terms of what they offer for the different prices that are out there. And if you like this video and you want to see more content that I've done related to the UAE and Qatar, then you can check out these two videos here. So next time, I'll see you in the next one, and let's get this money.